All right, so I wanted to give you a quick update on this 2023 tax season, particularly when are the refunds being deposited. So, just a bit of background here. January 23rd, 2023 was when the IRS officially opened to their e filing databases. So, a lot of tax preparation software allowed you to, quote, file before that date. But it was a bit misleading because what it means is you can file it with the provider, but the return isn't actually sent to the IRS, right? So the IRS officially opened their e-filing databases on the 23rd. Now, as far as refunds being deposited, generally, if you file your refund electronically, so your tax return gets filed electronically and you have direct deposit information entered, you can expect to get your refund within 7 to 20, 21 calendar days, more or less, about 2 to 3 weeks, right? Now, the reason why it's such a large range is because if there's completely no issues whatsoever, you might see it within a week. If it requires a little bit of validation or some checking with their database, maybe you got the latter half, right? So the 21 days might be the time period for your refund processing. The other thing to keep in mind is the PATH Act. So this is an issue every year. It has been for a number of years, but the PATH Act basically said that the IRS is not allowed to process your tax refund if you're claiming the earned income tax credit or the additional child tax credit, which is the refundable piece of the child tax credit. And so they can't process this until later February, early March. And this is done kind of as a safeguard for you as taxpayers because what they found was that there was so much rampant fraud with these types of filings that a lot of taxpayers were getting their refunds stolen because people would take their identity and file returns on their behalf just to be able to claim these credits. So now there's some additional validation that takes place, and so they've set a time kind of floor, so to speak, on when you can file before that deadline. That's fine. But the IRS won't actually issue you a refund until end of February, early March is what we see in practice. Now, the PATH Act limitation doesn't apply to your state tax return, right? So if you're filing, let's say, a Michigan or a New York return along with your federal, those state returns aren't going to be held up by this same type of limitation. So you might get your tax refund before you get your federal refund. That's not uncommon at all. Quick item on paper file returns. I can't stress this enough. I try to do it as frequently as possible and every year for sure. Do not file paper returns. Please try to avoid this at all costs. Paper returns are just much more inaccurate than e-filed returns, and the processing times are significantly longer. If you file a paper return, you're looking at least 2 months, right, rather than a week or 2 weeks. And even then, that is kind of a generous time frame. In practice, we often see more time required to get those returns processed, but this is what the IRS tells us. So I'm giving you the IRS numbers, but I'm telling you it's going to take longer. Now, if you're tempted to file a paper file return because buying the tax prep software is expensive or you can't afford to hire an EA or a CPA to do your return, that is fine. There are a lot of free file relationships that the IRS has with other types of providers. And so generally, if your adjusted gross income, your AGI is under 73,000, you can get access to be able to file your return electronically for free. Okay, so I'll put this link below. It's an irs.gov free file link, and go check that out. If you qualify, great. Use one of those providers because again, I can't stress enough. Try to e-file your return. Do not paper file it. Now, what if your 2021 return still is in process? We saw this issue with the previous 2 years, especially, but the problem with this circumstance is when we file tax returns, there's normally an AGI validation, that is, right? So what the provider is asking is provide us your adjusted gross income from the prior year, and we'll cross-check that with what is in the IRS database. And so if those don't match, then they won't process the return. Obviously, this is a problem if you filed your return in 2021 but it hasn't been processed because your AGI is still going to show as 0. So you have an AGI e-file validation error. Now the workaround is simply to just enter 0, right? So if you can see that your return has not been processed, but you filed it anyway, your AGI per the system is 0. So use 0 just to get your 2022 tax return through. But I would investigate this a little further because the IRS claims to be caught up on all their past due tax filings. So if you filed a 2021 tax return during 2022 and it still hasn't been processed yet, reach out to the IRS, try to figure out where it is. All right. Now, some of the common transcript codes. So these are the IRS account transcript codes that you'll see in your taxpayer portal. And so the transcript codes provide a code and then a description as to kind of where your tax return is along in the process, right? So code 150 is always a great sign because what that shows is that the IRS did in fact receive your return. So it's been received, it's been logged into the system, and now it's into the processing stages, right? And then ultimately what you're looking for is code 846, right? So 846 shows that the tax refund was actually not only accepted and processed, but it's been approved for release, right? So it's one thing to see the data being validated and processed, but when you see code 846, it means that, okay, the IRS has agreed now that we approve the refund, and so we're going to go ahead and actually issue you a check or issue a direct deposit, and then that'll be deposited into your bank account within a few business days. Some of these other common codes that I see a lot that taxpayers are experiencing the past few years are 810 and 811. So your refund is being frozen for one or more reasons. Now, could be good or bad, right? I mean, they might just have to look at more information, but if you see an 810, it just means it's on hold for whatever reason. And then 811 is the best sign. That means that whatever the frozen reasons were have now been kind of solved, right? And so now the refund's actually going to be issued to you. So, okay, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below. I'll keep you posted on these refund updates throughout the season. And happy tax season, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thanks.